Nian and Dusk, two lovely sisters with more mysteries around them than there are people shouting Kia whenever they see Skadi. Today we will go deep inside them and try to gather as much information on said mysteries as my weak brain allows me. That includes discussing the full extent of their powers, an analysis of their background and of their goals. This includes disclosing their undisclosed race. So, let's get started. Nian is an incredibly skilled blacksmith, so skilled that she is able to materialize stuff out of metal close to her, including that big boy in her E2 art and the motherfucking infinity blade. In a movie created by her and Lava in the Ancient Forge event, she also was able to create what she calls Tin Men, basically familiars materialized out of metal. It's up to you to decide whether that's an actual power she has, or just her being full of herself. Dusk's powers are a bit more complicated. She's a painter, a very skilled one at that. In fact, her paintings are so realistic that Saga was trapped inside one of them for almost 10 years. But she's not just a magical gender bender Bob Ross. People enter her paintings through a door which she materializes. In fact, that's how she lives at Rhodes Island. She just placed a door on a random wall and spends most of her day in there. Operators who occasionally happen to enter through that door say that they have entered a beautiful landscape of mountains and rivers with Dusk sitting bare-legged on the cliffs. I kind of want to see that. Despite their abilities being very different to each other, and despite Nian being described as the older sister, they seem to be pretty much at the same power level as when they were fighting across Dusk's different paintings near the end of the Who Is Real story. No clear winner could be seen, and the fight ended when Saga got between them and told them about the food she just ate. The powers of the two share two main characteristics. They are incredibly powerful. I think we do not need to elaborate on that, and they have nothing to do with Originium arts. That's right, our theoretical casters at Rhodes Island have tried multiple times to understand how their powers work, but since they genuinely don't rely on Originium arts at all, they haven't had any success there yet. On top of that, they are amongst the healthiest operators currently with us. Dusk, in fact, has not a single piece of magical rock drops inside her, something quite unheard of, since even the most posh and protected lads have at least a bit inside them. I would love to say the same thing about Nian as well, yet unfortunately she just decided that she doesn't want to get examined. Cal Pork doesn't do anything about it, so the medical department sends Gaviel to her on a regular basis in order to defeat her at stuff like a rock climbing competition, so that she will let them examine her, but sadly Gaviel loses every time. But even without the medical records, we can say that she is very healthy. Operators who also participated on the few missions she went out on claim that no matter what happens, she remains completely unharmed. This causes quite the confusion, because that's actually the stuff she is wearing during her missions. Seems like the inhabitants of Terra just don't understand the concept of anime armor. Although to be fair, her always being unharmed might just be a reference to the quality of the God King's shield she crafted for herself. Or, and that one definitely has to be taken into consideration, it is simply impossible to harm the two. That's where we start talking about the actual background of them. We know that those two are sisters, but in Who Is Real we learned that Nian and Dusk have 10 more brothers and sisters, making for a total of 12 mythical waifus and husbandos, rejecting both you and your Orundum. Right now we know absolutely nothing about them, yet since Nian is a blacksmith and Dusk is a painter, I am going to assume that the rest of them are also very cracked at another skill. But anyway, let's keep the fact that we have 12 siblings in mind, while we jump right into a very important piece of dialogue Nian and Dusk had in a classic mid-battle conversation. Most of the dialogue between them is rather interesting most of the time. For example, Nian calls Dusk an unsociable loner, and Dusk counters by telling Nian that she looks like a growing chili pepper. Great banter, guys. But it gets really interesting when they start talking about something else. We need to face the truth. By the time we wake up and gaze upon this world, you and I, as we exist right now, will disappear. We will set this whole world ablaze with our flames of rage. The humiliation and resentment inside me will burn up. You'll resist it? How will you, a mere part of the body, take on the whole? Before it awakens, we need to be fully prepared. What are they talking about? We'll disappear and it will awaken. We will become I anew before we all cease to exist as the destruction of the great Yen cities rings in the air. Don't think too much about all of that yet, just keep the general vibe of it in mind. We need to jump to a different part of who is real and talk about an ancient story Nian told Lava and her crew. It's a story of how Yen became how it is today because of the actions of one of the emperors of Yen, the true Lung. The Lung are the men who gave Lungmen its name, but they also always made up a huge chunk of Yen's general population. Another group of people who also were pretty common back in the day were gods. People described as gods could be found just living scattered throughout the country back in the day. From how I see it, those gods are not unkillable, but just very powerful beings that normies occasionally pray to. A more fitting term for them might be deity, which is what I will call them from now on. One day, the true Lung Emperor decided that the deities didn't use enough of their powers to help the nation develop and called upon his armies to defeat them. This was possible because one of the deities pulled a Patuanax on the rest of them, and after the rest of them were slaughtered, the Emperor also attacked that one traitorous deity. All of this is information which Nian directly tells Lava. Keep that in mind. Now, take everything that I have told you to keep in mind and ask yourself, who is real? Okay, don't do that, that was completely pointless. I just wanted to include the event name in a cool way. What you really should ask yourself is whether all these pieces of information are just that, information, or whether they are connected. There is no clear confirmation of that, but to me all these signs point towards the fact that all those siblings, including Nian and Dusk, are parts of this one ancient Arknights Yen Patuanax, and one day will all stop existing as individuals in order to help that one deity to reincarnate, or awaken, and take revenge on the Empire. Quite a revelation if you ask me, but all of this is not necessarily important to us as the Doctor right now, because if the siblings already have lived for a very long time, and will continue to live for a very long time, this whole reincarnation thingy doesn't have to happen within our time in Terra. After all, it's not like every prophecy in this world has to be fulfilled right now, just because a random dude with a hood and a PhD decided to create a harem for himself. Nonetheless, the possibility of them reuniting, literally reuniting, is something we need to remember when discussing some of Nian's behavior in Rhodes Island. She is very easygoing and a chill girl, but she is definitely not free of ulterior motivations. In a dialogue with Closure at the end of the Ancient Forge story, and it's one of the dialogues that actually happened in the real world, not in the movie, she talked about wanting to sell Rhodes Island to her siblings, by which she of course means selling the idea of living there. In her mid-battle dialogue, that's also what she tries to convince Dusk to do. In her operator record, there is some more about that. Her classified Trust 200 log seems to be her talking directly to someone and trying to convince that someone that it's a good idea to gather all her siblings at Rhodes Island. Now, how should we interpret this behavior? To me, it goes without saying that it has something to do with that whole reincarnation stuff. Does she do it because she wants to force all the siblings into the process of reuniting as that deity? Very unlikely, since in the dialogue with Dusk she seems rather opposed to that idea. What seems more reasonable to me is that she wants all the siblings to be together and more or less get along, so that the reuniting will not happen. But whatever it is, she definitely has a reason to push Rhodes Island into recruiting all of them. And you know, she might have found somewhat of an ally in Cal Pog, as our ex-wife has behaved rather interestingly and out of character if you ask me, when dealing with Nian. It begins with her allowing Nian to stay as a freeloader, she overlooks her stealing and copying classified data, she approves of Nian's request to go to Yen and look for Dusk. Quite possibly Cal knows of the background she has and doesn't want to oppose an Eldritch Arknights dragon god thing deity. Now, let's move on to the final point I want to discuss, which is the race of Nian, Dusk and the rest of the siblings, because when rereading the Ancient Forge story for this video, I have found some information which might indicate that they will not reincarnate into Arknights Partonax, but into Arknights Cthulhu instead. But I am getting ahead of myself. So, the race of both sissies is undisclosed. But we are big brain doctors out here, and we can make our own opinions. In this case, the info we will bounce off of is this part of the Act 3 of Ancient Forge, and it's also real-world dialogue. Closure calls the people of Nian mysterious and stuff, and then proceeds to mention how she wanted to ask someone else of the same people for an autograph. This is a reference to dialogue that was added to the EX stages of the rerun of the Obsidian Festival, where a member of the band Alive Until Sunset went on our landship and had an interaction with Kalcit. This interaction, by the way, was incredibly important and interesting, and will get an entire series of videos during Spooktober. But for now we just need to take the information that a member of an Aegirian band gets described as someone of the same people as Nian. A further confirmation for that point is the line that directly follows. Nian and that goth fish girl get directly called the same race, and Nian doesn't follow up with protesting against that statement, but with a joke referencing what Closure said. So feel free to interpret this information however you want to, but I see all this as a confirmation that Nian is an Aegirian, and so are her siblings, since, you know, they are her siblings. It's not that unrealistic anyway. PewStream shows that there are Aegirians native to Yen, and those horns seem more similar to the stuff growing out of Weedy's head than to the Lung horns. But you know, just because they are Aegirian, they don't have to be regular sea life. Kayobi, for example, gets categorized as a Perro, a dog girl, but she is based on the Kerberos, a mythical dog-like creature. So, Nian and Co. might as well be based on mythical sea life, like for example, I'm not sure, Patrick Star? There's always a bigger fish. Now, boys and girls, in my opinion this is all the important stuff you should know about Nian, Dusk and their siblings. I have not only given you straight facts here though, but also asked you a fair amount of questions, and I am genuinely curious about what you think about them. Especially about their race and that whole ancient deity reincarnation stuff. Only the future will be able to tell what's the truth. Let's hope that the next New Year's event will give us more answers and a new Patrick Star sibling to talk about. Although I am not sure about that latter part, as Dusk actually was teasered in the last cutscene of the Ancient Forge event, while in Who Is Real there hasn't been something like that. Maybe the EX stages will give us an extra cutscene, who knows. If you enjoyed this video, leave a sub and stick around, as I have 2 more videos on the Who Is Real event coming up in the next few days, which will go way more in depth on the actual stuff that happened inside the event's story. In the meantime, let me give a big shout out to my lovely channel members. Thanks a lot for supporting me and my work, and a very special thank you goes out to our 2 channel commanders, Vritten and Zerfai. Consider also becoming a member for some nice rewards, and no matter what you do, thanks a lot for watching, and I hope I will see you next time. Cheers!